Welcome to Your Awakening, a collection of life stories told by heart-centered, passionate women on a mission to live our truth. We hope you gain peace and strength through each conversation, as together we will raise the vibration of the world, one journey at a time. Hey everyone, welcome back to another beautiful series of Your Awakening. Today, I have another dear soul sister of mine, Vidya Ramachandran. She is a storyteller. She is a strategist. She is such a creative human. She is the founder of Warrior Strategy. And I'm so grateful to sit down with you today. Your story is so powerful. And I'm just so honored to have you.
Honored to be here. Thank you so much.
Share a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I am a founder of Warrior Strategy. So what I realized several years ago is that I wanted to offer, I work with women who are looking to transition careers, really finding something that is meaningful for them and really fills that purpose and fits into the lifestyle that they want to have. And so I've been doing this for the past 5 years, and it's really driven by my own personal story, which I think we'll be getting into. But I'm, very excited to talk to you about my experiences, and hopefully someone will find that interesting and give them a little bit of an idea of like how to move some things around for themselves.
Oh, love that. Yeah. Well, we'll just dive right in. And I always start with the beginning, which is our childhood. And tell me what was your childhood like? What was it like for Vidya?
So my childhood, I am the older of two girls, and my parents came from India in the 70s. And my father was a physician, and my mother for most of my life was a stay-at-home mom. And it was really interesting. I remember as a child, because my father was a physician, being asked a lot of times, do you want to be a doctor like your dad when you grow up? And I think that happens across any situation where someone might have like whatever their parents are, they get asked that question. But I just had this really visceral reaction every time. I'd be like, no, I don't want to be a doctor. I was grossed out by blood and like all of this stuff related to biology. So I spent most of my childhood knowing what I didn't want to do. And then I also like had the other parts of my childhood that I really remember now and are really, I think resonate with a lot of what I'm doing now with my coaching, is that I loved like dancing, and I remember like as a young child, I would get dressed up in my Indian clothes and be wearing like bracelets and bangles and necklaces and all dressed up, and have my parents put on this video that we used to have of a classical dance, a dance group doing a performance, and I would just like mimic what they were doing. But interestingly enough, the other side of it is that I was a really shy kid. Like I really loved that performing dance part, but only if no one else was watching me. So it was interesting, like trying to battle those two sides of growing up wanting to be that creative expression, but also being nervous about bringing it in front of others and really lighting up that part of myself.
Yeah. So were you raised in the States?
Yes, I was born and raised in the US. And it's also interesting because as an Indian American, I really felt growing up, especially like middle school, high school age, that it's very Indian at home and then not Indian like as soon as I left the house and was in school with my friends, all that stuff. So that dichotomy there was also an interesting balance that I tried to.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think that that's a space that a lot of people probably deal with. I mean, can you broaden a little bit? I mean, how did you manage? Because it's almost like you were this at home, this at school, and then of course you have the whole like expectation you should be a doctor. Like you have a lot of things weaved in there.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think what my struggle was growing up is that I actually let those, I really wasn't able to merge those two very well. So I grew up, I was very academic focused. I was tiny for my age, so I always got picked last for like gym class. So I never really got into sports. My activities really were around Indian classical dance, Indian classical music. I played flute, because a friend of mine in school had played flute and I really wanted to play flute like her. But other than that, I really didn't incorporate a lot of the non-Indian aspects of the day-to-day of being brought up in America into my childhood. So most of it was just like, okay, I ate obviously non-Indian foods and things like that. But from a perspective of what I really focused on growing up, it was really tied to the academics and, a lot more of that Indian side of me.
So what did you love? Like, what did you dream about doing other than dancing and creative and like having all of this movement creation? Were you ever like dreaming of being something other than all of the things you knew you would not be?
I think that's where it was a struggle, because I really have been thinking back a lot these last few months, and I don't know that I had any idea of what I wanted to be growing up. I remember, I do remember that the dance thing, like we talked about, like pretending that, like playing house or whatever that young kids would do. But other than that, I don't know. I think part of it was not really having exposure to what else is out there that really made it difficult for me to even think about what could I be as a child. And then as an adult, or, closer to high school, really it was like I really enjoyed French. If I went back, maybe I would have majored in French in college. But the thought was like, what would you do with a French degree, or what would you do with this? So it was still really drawn back to, okay, what was understood? Maybe it's like implicit cultural norms, but like science and engineering, or, these more like traditional, even across industries,
well,
right?
Even business, like just get a business degree, or because I know me personally, I always wanted to be a TV broadcaster, right? So broadcasting, and it's like you're French, like what would I do with that? And that's a serious like problem going on today with fear and paradigms and all of these social stories and family stories that are not allowing people to shine with like true purpose when they step into their career field. So what are some things, like what were some really imperative moves that you made to help you understand your purpose, your why? Because it's a lot of like, I don't want this. I mean, what advice can you give? Because I know, just knowing you're in your purpose field now, but it takes work and different things to get there.
Yeah, so it started, I think I want to say my mid-20s. What I realized is, and it started more from a how do I want to live my life perspective. And I was seeing I was in corporate America, really liking the job, but it was travel, it was a lot of hours. And I was seeing a lot of my colleagues around me who had families. And at the time I didn't, but I knew I wanted one. And their work-life balance, they were always feeling guilty about something. And for me, that was the first trigger point of maybe this is not what I want to do in 10 years, because a lot of them were in that 7 to 10 years older than me age range. If that's not, I need to make a change. And that was the first trigger of like, well, what is it that I could do? The downside is I was like, academia, which is also an approved, career path. But I thought it would give me the flexibility that I wanted. I could do research that I wanted. I could impact young minds. And then I went into a doctoral program, and 2 years later, I was like, this is not it for me. What else is there? And what really triggered after that is after I got over that fear of failure, and that's a whole other topic. But I remember the pivot point for me was I saw a friend had posted something on Facebook about a program that she was doing, like a self-development program. And that was my first foray into self-development, really. And understanding that I have that permission to really go back to my childhood and think, what was I interested in then? And what were those aspects throughout my life that really fired me up? And what can I do with that? And then that helped me, those tools kind of helped me really start thinking about what is my purpose and what do I want my vision and mission and all of that to be.
That's so powerful, because I think all of us are on different different timelines of like awakening and self-development and self-growth and expansion. And you know, so I guess what brings up for me is, when was the moment of like, I've got to do something? I mean, you saw the post on Facebook, but what was the driving like gut punch of,
I can tell you.
Yeah, I've done all these things. You did a lot. You asked a lot of questions. It sounds like you had a lot of trials. You allowed yourself the permission. I always will say this, like, give yourself the permission to fail enough to succeed. And so what was the gut punch of?
Well, so it was really tied to, so I decided to leave the doctoral program. And I mean, I left with a master's, but I still felt like such a failure. I was like, what can I do? And I remember just feeling panic. And this was tied to like, I need an income, I need health insurance, what should I do? I worked with a recruiter and I jumped back into a market research job at a corporation, a new location, new industry, but still the same functional piece that I've been doing for the 5 years previously. And 6 months into that, I was like, wait a second, I'm exactly where I was, but I don't, you know, but possibly missing some things that I had. And I made a conscious choice to leave this experience because I wanted to like make a difference in how my life turned out. And that is when I saw that post, along with like that, with, you know, those two things coming together, it was exactly the right time, I think. And being able to, because if I had seen that post, but I wasn't feeling that, what the hell am I doing back in this situation? I probably wouldn't have followed up. And so it was really being in that. And it was interesting to me because my friend was Indian and had gone through some of the same thing. Like she was in medical school and then decided to leave, but she's also a dancer and she ended up becoming a coach. And so I think seeing her kind of model that for me is like, you can be Indian and do something different. And, you know, it's possible. I mean, you have to still work through the other aspects of it, like
the internal.
I wonder what you're doing.
The internal work, really. Yeah. And so it's almost like the revolving door syndrome, right? So you step out, then you get back into almost the same thing. A few things are different. What are some, like, how would you walk your clients through? Because I know this is what you deal with specifically with your clients, is breaking free of cultural norms or standards or stories because you've lived it.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I would say is one of the questions that I like to ask myself is if you were, you know, would you, because there are people, you know, there are people that are following these more traditional, maybe quote unquote paths, like doctors. I have several family members who are physicians and loving it, that are lawyers and loving it, you know, that they feel that is their sense of purpose. But if there's an aspect of those roles that, you know, you are in a role that you're not enjoying, ask yourself, would you do this for free? Like if you weren't getting paid, is this something that you would do?
That's a good one.
And what I found when I asked myself that is there are aspects of my roles that I liked, like the interactions I had with people, or the, you know, like creative aspects that were tied to the role. But there were also big aspects that I didn't like. And so that helped me identify that. And then the second piece is, if you could do anything, if you didn't have to worry about finances, you know, any of that stuff that really drives a lot of our decisions these days, what would you do? For me, for me, that was doing a lot more of the creative and the aspect, like the creative aspects, and really helping others kind of break through that. And then you have to do obviously the work to figure out what is the right combination of what you would want to develop.
It's like a pie chart.
Yeah.
To bring it to some data analytics, and it's like 1%. I like that.
Yeah.
honestly. So what are some, because you've done a really awesome job of breaking free and just following your own path. How did you bring this up with family members? Like how? That's so scary. It's very scary.
It is. It is very scary because even when I was doing market research, my parents, my sister could never explain to somebody what I was doing. Like they didn't even understand what that was. It helped that I was in the pharma industry for a while because they could tie that because they're physicians. My sister's also a physician. And I just remember trying to broach this conversation with them that, I'm going to try to do this thing, but having to bring it from a very like, it's really based in all of the, the marketing and the strategy and the like all of the intellectual aspects of what I've done and kind of create that story based on those key aspects that they could kind of understand. And then broach, even now, even now my parents are like, what exactly are you doing?
Right. Oh, listen, I know. Yeah, it's and it's like on an enlightened path of constant self-development and self-rediscovery. I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago, 8 months ago, a year ago. And that's just, I guess it all ties into values and where self-love / growth / whatever else you want to development you want to put in it, that's literally moved up to my number one. It wasn't my number one 3 years ago. And I'm sure it's been the same with you. So at what point, I guess it was in your 20s and you started this self-development path and it's been a consistent for you. Like, is that what you'll say to, I mean, what's your advice around that?
So I started it was probably towards my late 20s. I actually pulled the trigger and went to the doctoral program when I was in my early 30s. So it has been a shift throughout. Like I've just been, there have been some side steps where I've, done some work to just keep my hand in certain areas and really build the relationships with organizations and people. But I talk to people about it like it's a puzzle. And you have all these pieces of the puzzle, which might not go together. But once you figure out what it is you want to do, there's a way to get those pieces to fit together. And that's actually part of what I work with my clients is helping them craft that story of how. So for my example, I've got, an undergrad degree in chemistry. I've got an MBA. I've got another master's degree in marketing. I've done finance and science and global health consulting. I've got all these different pieces, but it's building
a very large resume that you get to create a puzzle from.
Yeah. But yeah, exactly. And everyone has that. It's pulling the skills throughout all the work that they've done, or even from, other, like their personal life that is relevant, and really learning how to fit those pieces together and have that story to tell.
That's a really good point, because I will talk with people. I mean, I've had a few people that I'll talk about, they're getting ready to go on an interview or something. And for you, you said the personal piece. I have found, like, I think a lot of people forget we are living, walking resumes with everyday life. And like, how do you best say to take this that happened in your personal life to spin it into a role that you're thinking about?
Well, so I'll give you an example of a friend of mine. She was a public health professional and wanted to get into event planning. And so she went up for this interview. And they asked her, like, what event planning experience do you have? And she's like, I just planned my 600-person big fat Indian wedding.
Yes. Hello.
And she's like, I had to deal with vendors. I had to deal with, basically, like, yeah, exactly.
That's like that can be the worst vendor. Is that?
Exactly. And so what I've also realized too, and I don't know if it's just me through my own self-development work, is that when you're talking to potential employers, I really am believing in while they're seeing you're a good fit for them, you're also seeing if they're a good fit for you. And so lay it out on the table, like, you know, this is what my experience is. Like I've done, whether it's, there's no reason to like tiptoe around it. If you have that experience, you have that experience. You might as well talk about it.
Yeah. How do you show up in an interview ready to basically, because I 100% agree, you're interviewing them. I mean, you should not go into a situation or accept a job if it's not a good fit for your values, morals, etc. What are some tips, like some really good questions that could help people build their question base if they're getting ready to go interview?
Well, a few. One, you know, you can ask like what they want, what they expect from the role in the first 90 days, in the first 6 months. You know, like what would make that the person in that role be a success. That I've learned from my own experience. I wish I'd asked that in a couple of jobs, because there was a misalignment, and then I was like, well, now I'm already in the job. Again, also understanding a lot about the company culture or the organization's culture, the department's culture. How do the teams interact with each other? What is their communication style? That's definitely key to ask. And it's fine to ask upfront, like, how do you typically interact with your employees, or how do you, you know, check in with your employees? What are those check-ins like? Then also, I would say, I would go back and actually follow up with the I can't remember if I said the qualities aspect but like what qualities would make someone successful in this role?
Yeah.
And actually I heard someone talk about recently, and I'm like, that's a great question, is what qualities might not, like, does a person who did not succeed in this role have, to understand like what are some of the watch outs? Because if those are qualities you find important and they said that's really like did not help that person succeed, and that's a way to think about, is this the right company for you?
Yeah, those are all really, really good. And I think this is just coming up as like, we were talking about personal, but the work-life balance. Where's that in your life now? You're following your purpose, and how do you guide clients to understand when you're not, I'll always say, like, when your satisfaction tank is not 100% full, like you're depleted in some ways, you're not showing up fully.
Yeah, well, for me personally, you know, it's interesting. I had started this journey. Part of it was because my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And I remember when I was a child, I really didn't like the fact that she was a stay-at-home mom, because all my friends went home, or a lot of my friends went home to an empty house. They got to, you know, like hang out with themselves in their house. And I would come home and either my mom or my grandmother would be there. It's like, there's always somebody there.
Yeah.
But I really started appreciating that as I got older. And I realized, like, if I, you know, when I have a family, I do want to have that flexibility to be there for whichever, you know, however many kids I have, if I have children. And so, but for now, I'm just taking the time, you know, like I'm building in time for myself to meditate in the morning, to have a little dance party, you know, a few times a day, to find classes that I'm interested in. Like I just moved to Chicago a few months ago, and I'm like interested in finding, you know, jazz classes. I used to play alto sax for a little bit, but you know, or finding French classes, because I love French. Just trying to make sure I build in enough time for things that make me happy, and then fit everything else around that. It's actually, I think, important to make sure those are factored in first.
Yeah.
So that, because those are typically the first things to go.
Yes,
So,
that is such a valid point. It's like the bubbles, like the inner bubble, the core is what you need for nourishment and fulfillment, and then the other stuff can like form around it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
that's
then,
a really.
And then with my clients, what I do is I have them go through an exercise where they prioritize what really is important to them. So, you know, I've had some clients say like flexibility, or, you know, a chance to move up in their, you know, career progression and things like that. So then, like, by really prioritizing that, when they're looking at potential opportunities, they can see, like, they'll have an actual piece of paper, hopefully, with things that that job has to hit. And then if it doesn't, then that gives you a, you know, that's almost an easier way to say this is not a good fit.
Right. And going back to personal and cultural, how are you balancing it today? Because it sounded like that was quite a trip back in the day when you were younger. So how have you managed, because I know it's really, because I know you, it's important to keep that.
Yeah. I've actually, over the last few years, really focused on bringing those pieces back into my life. You know, I was part of a dance community and music community when I was in DC, where I lived before. I'm actively searching for one here that focuses on Indian, either classical or Bollywood dance. Just creating space for that. I think also just part of it is understanding that the cultural aspect doesn't have to keep you from, or keep me from, pursuing other aspects of my life. Because yes, there are now a lot more women or people doing non-traditional careers, but there's still that voice in the back of my head, like, I know when I went for that PhD, there was a voice saying like, oh, if you get this PhD, you'll at least be a doctor, even if you're not a medical doctor, right? So I think just like listening to that, but then realizing that that is not your voice telling you that, that's not your, you know, like your essence telling you that, and that even within what you are passionate about, or I guess what I am passionate about, what I like to do, I can still embrace the whole cultural aspect of it. I just don't have to be like forced into a box because of expectations.
Yeah. And the voice is, a lot of times it's fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like fear is not going to show up and say, I'm here to kill your purpose.
Yeah.
Hello. No, it's like the soft, cuddly toy that we always had as a kid. Like, I'm here to make you safe.
Yeah.
You're not going to get hurt again. What are some practices that you use to tame the fear, soothe yourself?
You know, I would say community is a huge, I mean, you know this as well, right? So we're part of one community in one of the programs we've done, and having someone be able to stand up for you and say that, no, you know, this is what lights you up, this is what you're passionate about, keep going for it, you know, keep doing something about it. That has been key, because there's still a lot of people in the world that might look at you and say, what are you doing? So you need to have that stronger grounding aspect. I've gone back into journaling a lot, you know, I started journaling probably 7 or 8 years ago, and then had like a few years where I just wasn't doing it, and I really got back into that. I've been doing a gratitude journal. I tell a lot of my clients to do that, just to remind myself that things are moving forward, things are going well, and if at least not all, like some aspects of my life at all times. And then really just spending more time listening to like for me it's dance or music, right? Spending more time actually, whether it's playing something off of YouTube or in the morning while I'm getting ready, just having something there to remind me every day that this is a huge part of my life.
And I love, because I was just recently, I had the opportunity to get a stay with you, spend some time. Y'all, she was blaring this music, but I love that it was Indian. You know, and I was like, I don't know what they're saying, but it's just a beautiful thing to have witnessed of, like, that's such a good blend of like, this is me, and you'll take this part and then you might go do this part, and like it's all just like collective pieces that create where we are. And you talked on tribe, and I speak on this a lot, and the program that we're in it's called Beauty Unleashed, and I think a new one starts up in January, a new group. And I know when I was introduced to this, I was like, I don't want a group. I do not need a group of women. I can do this on my own. I'm good. Clearly, I needed the group of women. And it just amazes me that this is such a miss. And whether you're a woman or a man, both, we all need a tribe and a group and like a safe container space. So how has that changed for you? I mean, have you done groups before? This was like my first large group of like holding space where it was a really tight community. And so tell me about community and how it's empowered you.
Community has been a huge part. So my first exposure to this is, well, I would say I had a tight knit group of friends in college. I went to a women's college, and so, I mean, I was really lucky to get because I always feel like I need that strong group of women to kind of, we support each other instead of tearing each other down. And so that was a little bit of my first experience. But then people go doing their, they go off on their own directions. And even though we're still friends, like I really didn't have that self-development community until I started that first program in 2012. And that was very interesting to me because I started out as a private client with a facilitator coach. And she was like, oh, you should just come in. It was in New York. I lived in Philly at the time. She's like, it's called She Creates Change. It's a wonderful program. She's like, you should just come in for a weekend. We're starting a new group. And so I came in for the weekend, and it was amazing to just be around all these women who are trying to, make positive change in the world. And I remember like we had our closing circle, and everyone's like what they're grateful for. And I just started bursting out into tears because I was like, I'm gonna have to go back and be by myself to continue this journey on myself. And then obviously we worked it out, so I joined the group. But that's where I realized like how important it is to have fellow that community to also go on that journey with you. And I have to say, I think that one was a very tight group. And then obviously our Beauty Unleashed group was a very tight group. I felt like I could, I felt connected to everybody in the group. And it was interesting because I did realize that as much as I really embrace that community aspect, I do need to ask for support more than I can ask for support more than I do currently, because I do try to go off and do things on my own, and it's been a little bit, and then finally ask for support. But I think that's the power of that community, is that it's expected that you will be asking for support and receiving support. And so making use of that is definitely something that I would have probably done a little differently.
And you say like, because I feel that today's woman wears a lot of hats, but more so feels the need to put on like a masculine mask of in logical brain all of the time, very strong, independent, this like warrior to like, just like, and the need to have the support of someone else to really just be.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know you have a lot of women clients. I'm sure the percentage is 90%. You don't even need to put a percentage out there of women showing up in this very like rigid, tough manner. And I'm speaking from my own experience of needing to do that, being in sales for 13 plus years. And how do you work with them as a career coach to just be, to sit in a more feminine?
I think from my perspective, it's because a lot of the times the clients that I've worked with, they're either moms or wanting to be moms, and so they feel like they have to have everything together, and still have a career and be there for their families. Part of it, part of the exercises that I do with them is to try to get them to just slow down. Which it's interesting because I've realized recently that a lot of what I tell my clients, I have to work more on doing myself.
Yeah. That's how it always is. That's like how it, yeah.
But yeah, so part of it is, and I work a lot with women trying to build up confidence, because it's, being able to ask for what you need and being able to say that, yes, I can do something other than what I'm doing right now. And a lot of those exercises are really tied to like going back and finding times when they've, had something that worked out for them, or where they felt that faith, they had that faith and it turned out well for them, and really focusing on those examples so that they realize like there is something there that within them that they can still utilize for other aspects of their life. but yeah, slowing down and really taking stock of what is important and then working from that space.
And the feeling tone. Like I see your
Yeah.
point. Like it's the feeling tone that's connected to that time of success or happiness.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been working a lot, like with some of my more recent clients, like really saying like, how do you feel? Like bringing a lot more of that, those types of questions in, like, how does this make you feel? Like, what are you feeling when you get this response for someone, or you're, you know, considering a potential job? Like, is it like really trusting in that?
Yeah. So what would you say is the need for fulfillment of true freedom from all of these, whether you're dealing with a cultural constraint or it could just be family stories, society stories? There's a lot of things circling out there. It's not just pegged to like one thing or another. I mean, why is it so incredibly important?
You want to make sure you're fulfilling your dreams, not somebody else's dreams, right? And so
So true. So powerful.
and what I realized, and this is my personal experience and what I've seen with like a lot of my younger cousins, a lot of my younger, like, you know, friends who are Indian and other cultures. And I mean, I don't think Indian is the only you know, factor on this, but they start down this path. And what I wish I had done as well is I went into my senior year of high school saying, I'm going to get a chemistry degree. And I wish I had been more open, and wish I had felt that permission to just slow down and say, this next 4 or 5 year, whatever, 4 years, once I get to college, is about really exploring what's out there and seeing what resonates with me. Obviously, I would not have understood that terminology probably at 16 or 17, but like, but really, like, for me, fulfillment means like I've looked to see what's out there and really try to measure that against, like, would that make me happy? Would this make me feel like I'm bringing something to the world, like I'm leaving a legacy or an impact on the world? And not every role has to, not every job has to, but and not everyone has that goal. But I think if I had given myself the time to really like test things out, and test things out meaning like expose myself to different topics and what people are doing in the world, and now it's even easier. Like there's so many more of these traditional and non-traditional roles that people have that are on social media. You know, people talk about things, right? So like it's a lot easier now to go and research, oh, what does a coach mean? Like 20 years ago, what did it, like, we'd be like, what?
We're
What
in
is
a
it?
mindfulness space, yeah.
Yeah. So I think like really slowing down and taking that time to explore what's out there and what resonates is, I think, what will lead to fulfillment. And I'm speaking from, like, I know so many people, as a side note, just like that are like, okay, I'm going to go to a 6-year med program, or I'm going to go to a 7-year med program. Like, do you know in high school that you really want to be a physician? Like, do you know what, because it's not just patient care. And I'm picking this because this is the one career that I'm most familiar with. Like, I have family members that are like, I thought I was going into this for, you know, to take care of patients, but there's just so much administration, there's just so much all this other stuff around it that completely takes away the joy of helping somebody. And so, like, learning more about things before, and getting the full picture before jumping into one path could help you get to that fulfillment sooner rather than later.
Yes, that's beautiful. And I think the other tie-in is making it okay. Giving yourself permission for whatever, like, your gut, your intuition is really nudging you towards. Find the tribe or community or the mastermind group, whatever you want to call it, that can stand in believing for you when you might not.
Yeah.
Because it's just so important. And so we're going to wrap up, and I always like to ask one like final juicy question around, because we've talked a lot about breaking free and freedom, and what do you see, what would you love to see for women, particularly because I know that's who you work with, in regards to career roles and the future for women in freedom of stories, cultural standards, all of that?
Oh wow, that's such a loaded question.
We could be here.
A lot.
Let's go get coffee.
I think part of it is tied to that permission that we've been talking about. I want women to feel like they have the permission to do whatever they want to do, and that it can be figured out. A lot of our fear is tied to, are we going to be able to pay rent? Are we going to be able to get health insurance? Are we going to be able to save for retirement? And I think that fear closes us off. So really, if you're really passionate about something, I truly believe there's a way to turn that into something that you can do, and you can do for a decent income. So it's really, I would love to see more women take their ideas. Like, I have friends that are brilliant at certain things that they could turn into careers, I think, and I've talked to some of them about it, but they're just, they're like, no, this was a great idea, but I think I'm going to go down this route instead because it's more stable. And really feeling that if there was a way that we had a, like, I don't know what it is, but like through a community or something to really hold that space across like the financial, the emotional, every one of those aspects where we might be holding back, and really set the stage for our women to just run with ideas. But like, I want to see more women kind of just moving forward with their ideas. And
Freedom!
Really, yeah.
Yes. Ugh, beautiful. Thank you so much for your time. Anyone that's out there, if you were called to some of her points, to what Vidya was explaining and describing that she offers in her coaching, all of her info will be in the notes. She's on Instagram. There will be her email there. Feel free to reach out. She's a beautiful soul. She's here to support you. And I'm just thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I had so much fun talking to you today.
Awesome. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, everyone.